The movie starts off with a young writer named Nell Phillips reciting a chapter of her newly published book. With excitement lacing her voice, she reads to her audience about a magical small town named Derryville, where every single person knew each other and lived in harmony. It turns out that Nell's new book, Small Town Christmas, became a bestseller, so to promote it further, she goes to different cities and towns as a part of her immensely long book tour. As Nell finishes reciting her book, the audience claps and praises her for her talent. Shortly after, several people line up to get their copies signed by the author herself. Nell gladly signs multiple books and hands them over to her fans. She then prepares to head out. Just then, the event manager for her book tour excitedly tells her that she absolutely loves the book and even wishes Derryville were a real place. Nell simply smiles, knowing that the story of Derryville is actually inspired by a real-life town that is quite close to her heart. The scene now cuts to a young man named Emmett Turner walking through a bustling town. With Christmas around the corner, every nook and cranny is filled with Christmas decorations. Emmett happily admires the ornaments and greets his friends along the way. He then enters his bookstore, Page Turner, to continue working for the day and greets his friends along the way. Back in Chicago, Nell finally finishes her book tour and excitedly tells her publisher Caroline that she's glad the entire fiasco is over. But just then, Caroline informs her that she still has an interview to attend before the official end of the tour. In the meantime, a very ambitious businessman, Brad, talks to his boss, Lance, about Springdale. Being a land developer, he exclaims that Springdale is America's best-kept Christmas secret, so if they were to build some fancy spots there, it could turn into one of the hottest holiday destination spots. Lance is incredibly impressed by the idea and wishes to start the project right away, so he asks the latter to visit the place and plan renovations immediately. Meanwhile, Nell attends the Hello Chicago interview, where she answers some important questions about her book and even Derryville. She explains that Derryville is influenced by a small town in Wisconsin named Springdale. Nell then tells the interviewer that her former co-worker grew up there and used to tell her stories about the place. Feeling inspired, she decided to write a book based on it. When Caroline watches the interview, she plans to send Nell to Springdale in order to gain more traction. In Springdale, a very exhausted Emmett not only takes care of his bookstore, but also helps his daughter finish her assignment. While doing so, he receives a call from Caroline asking to schedule a book signing event at his bookstore. Emmett contemplates for quite a while before agreeing to host the event. However, when he learns that the event is for none other than Nell, his face turns pale. On the other hand, as soon as Nell finishes her interview, Caroline asks her to go to Springdale as the final destination for her tour. Nell tries to refuse, but Caroline doesn't even give her a choice. Furthermore, she states that after doing some research, she recognized Emmett as her former New York co-worker, which is why she plans to host the book tour at his store. Needless to say, Nell is shocked by the news and doesn't know how to comprehend it. It turns out that Nell and Emmett had a history together. Not only did the latter dazzle her with the idea of his hometown, but he also asked her out on a date. Sadly, he never showed up. In fact, he quit his job, moved back to Springdale, and opened up a bookstore. Distraught by this behavior, Nell never contacted him, but she also never forgot about him. Because of this reason, she is quite hesitant to reunite with Emmett. Unfortunately, she has no other choice. Soon after, Nell begins packing for her trip. While doing so, she reflects on Emmett and looks at all the pictures they took together. It's clear that she is still in love with him. Meanwhile, Emmett prepares for the book signing event and reads Nell's book. He is shocked to discover that she has thanked him for inspiring the story. Moving forward, Nell finally packs all her bags and prepares to head to Springdale. She meets Caroline at the airport and tries to see if she can weasel her way out of this situation. However, she ends up failing miserably. Eventually, Caroline notices Nell's utter discomfort at visiting the town and meeting Emmett, so she asks the latter about her relationship with him. That's when Nell reveals that Emmett actually stood her up a couple of years ago. With a solemn face, she exclaims that she really liked him and desperately wanted a future with him. Caroline understands the entire situation and in the end, simply asks Nell to focus on her work and nothing else so that they can return back as soon as possible. In Springdale, all of the residents excitedly wait for Nell's arrival. They read her book and feel proud of being represented in such a beautiful way. Seeing this, Emmett feels really happy but also nervous since he will be seeing her after so many years. Later, while working at a cafe, Emmett hears two elderly women talking about Nell's book. He joins them and reveals that he and Nell used to work together a few years ago. He then explains that he even asked her out on a date, but unfortunately, things never worked out due to unforeseen circumstances. Hours later, Nell arrives in Wisconsin and quickly rents a car. Just as she is about to drive away, she notices a young man who seems to be stuck there. Upon investigating further, she learns that he is headed to Springdale as well. Wanting to help, Nell offers the man, who is none other than Brad, a ride. Brad readily agrees, and soon the two drive away together. Whilst traveling, Brad tells Nell that he works in a venture capital firm and wants to turn Springdale into a popular tourist destination. He tries to explain more, but that's when Nell gets a call from Caroline, informing her about her entire itinerary. Caroline further tells Nell that she has multiple book tours, interviews, and even some fun Christmas activities to attend. The latter agrees to stick to her schedule and quickly hangs up. Brad listens to the entire conversation and finally recognizes Nell. Now awestruck, he congratulates her for her book's success, and then asks if she'd accept him as her partner for the upcoming Christmas activities happening in Springdale. As expected, Nell gladly accepts the offer. Moments later, the two arrive in Springdale. Once there, the two learn that they're actually staying at the same hotel. They quickly reach their destination and prepare to head inside. Brad carries all of their luggage inside while Nell stays back to park her car. Suddenly, she hears someone call out her name. She immediately turns around and sees none other than Emmett standing before her. Before she can say anything, Emmett runs up to her and hugs her tightly. Surprised, Nell stutters for a moment before greeting him. They then chat about their lives as though they are old friends. After a brief conversation, Emmett asks Nell to get all the rest she needs because they will be going on a tour the next day. Nell readily agrees and bids him goodbye. Later, Nell walks into the hotel and is awestruck by its warmth and beauty. Just as she is about to check into her room, Brad thanks her for the ride and asks her to join him for the upcoming tree lighting ceremony. Nell happily accepts the invitation. The very next morning, Emmett picks Nell up and proceeds to give her a quick tour of the town. He shows her all the fun spots and even introduces her to the wonderful people there. Eventually, the two reach Page Turner, which happens to be Emmett's store. They quickly enter the place whilst chatting and discussing their schedule for the day. In the meantime, a very focused Brad meets with the mayor of Springdale and proposes his idea of turning the place into an idealistic tourist spot. He presents his plans of repurposing and renovating various areas of the town in order to cater to a larger base. Needless to say, the mayor is thoroughly impressed by the idea and urges Brad to proceed with this project. On the other hand, Emmett gives Nell a brief tour of his bookstore and even shows her the designated spot for her book. He then introduces her to his employee, Haley, who tells Nell that everyone in town absolutely adores her. Hearing this, Nell expresses her heartfelt gratitude to her well-wishers. After a pleasant conversation, she bids Emmett goodbye and returns back to her hotel. There, she tries to write the introductory chapter for the sequel to her book, but struggles with writer's block. Back at the bookstore, Emmett talks to his friend Jenny while arranging Nell's books on the shelves. He reveals that Small Town Christmas has become a major hit and is now everyone's favorite. Jenny then asks Emmett about his meeting with Nell. Emmett replies that the meeting went well, except that Nell didn't mention the letter he sent her after leaving New York. He explained that he had to return abruptly due to a family emergency. A couple of years ago, Emmett's sister Paige, who used to run the bookstore, was involved in a tragic accident with her husband. Both of them sadly passed away, leaving behind their young daughter, Marnie. After learning of this devastating news, Emmett hastily left everything behind to care for Marnie and run the bookstore in tribute to his late sister. Months later, he sent Nell a letter explaining the entire situation, but it never reached her. At present, Emmett simply sighs deeply and tells Jenny that there is no use reminiscing about the past. He then goes back to tending to the customers. The scene now cuts to Nell browsing through a small toy store. Just as she's walking around the place, she gets a call from Caroline asking about her meeting with Emmett. With a very stoic face, Nell informs Caroline that Emmett didn't mention his sudden absence at all. It's evident that she never received his letter and is still unbeknownst to everything that had happened. After sighing deeply, Nell tells Caroline that Emmett probably just doesn't care about the moments they spent together. She then hangs up and continues looking at the toys in front of her. That's when she runs into Marnie and Haley. Nell initially assumes that Marnie is Haley's daughter. However, the latter quickly clarifies that she's simply watching over the kid for Emmett. Hearing this, Nell thinks that Marnie is actually Emmett's daughter. Feeling awkward, Nell rushes out of the store, but ends up running into Emmett instead. As they start talking, Emmett excitedly asks if she's enjoying her time in the city. Nell replies that she is, and tries to walk away. Just as she's about to leave, Emmett invites her to join them for the tree lighting ceremony happening that evening. Nell agrees and quickly walks away. That night, Nell and Brad go to the annual Springdale tree lighting ceremony together and are fascinated by all the activities and delicious Christmas treats there. The two explore around for quite some time whilst talking about their own Christmas experiences before. Brad even takes this opportunity to flirt with Nell. However, his excitement ends pretty quickly when Emmett approaches them and starts asking about their experience in Springdale so far. As Nell chats with Emmett, Brad excuses himself to take some important calls. Just then, Marnie runs up to Nell and invites her over to their house. The latter gladly accepts and thanks her for the invite. Moments later, Nell asks Emmett about Marnie's mother, only to learn that it is actually his sister, Paige. She suddenly realizes that the little girl is Emmett's niece. Confused, Nell then inquires about Paige and her husband. Emmett explains the entire situation and asks if she ever received his letter. But before she can even respond, Marnie pulls her uncle away, leaving them both puzzled. Shortly after, Brad rejoins Nell, and together they participate in the upcoming Secret Santa event. They then attend the mayor's speech, where he announces that Brad's company will provide Springdale with substantial capital. This would thus transform Springdale into a major tourist destination. However, the townspeople are unexpectedly disappointed by the news. They become even more upset when they learn that the mayor plans to introduce new Christmas festivals aimed at tourists. The situation quickly escalates, so Emmett instantly takes the stage to calm the crowd. He then introduces Nell and, as the chief guest, invites her to light the town's Christmas tree. Thankfully, his plan works, and the entire crowd cheers enthusiastically for Nell. Later, Nell joyfully lights the Christmas tree, and the crowd erupts in applause. The choir begins shortly after, engulfing the place with Christmas carols and a hot chocolate aroma. At that moment, a very anxious Brad approaches Emmett and thanks him for taking control of the situation. He then asks Emmett if he is keen on selling his store. Seeing as the bookstore has been in his family for years, Emmett quickly declines. Not wanting to be a part of the conversation anymore, he walks over to Nell and asks her to read a small excerpt of her book for the townspeople. Nell happily does so, and even signs multiple copies of the book for her fans. Eventually, the event ends, so Emmett returns back home with Marnie and puts her to bed. Similarly, Nell also finishes up with her meet and greet and goes back to her hotel. The very next morning, a very stunned Nell calls Caroline and tells her the reason behind Emmett's sudden disappearance. She explains that he had to rush to Springdale in order to take immediate custody of his niece. Caroline simply nods upon hearing all this and asks for a chance with him again. Nell, however, instantly refuses, saying he's already too busy with his life. Nell then bids Caroline goodbye and heads on over to Emmett's bookstore. There, she meets Marnie, and the two chat for quite a while. Later, Emmett arrives and informs Nell that they need to go to the radio station for an interview. They bid Marnie goodbye and leave the bookstore. At the radio station, Nell answers a couple of questions about her inspiration for the book, and even thanks Emmett for introducing her to Springdale in the process. She talks about the book's main essence and thanks all the readers for their love and support. After a long interview, Emmett and Nell drive away from the radio station. During the drive, Nell asks Emmett if it was hard to leave his life in New York City to take care of Marnie. Emmett replies that it was, but he felt it was his duty as Marnie's sole guardian. Later that day, the two decide to prepare for the upcoming tree decorating competition. They walk up to a massive Christmas tree, planning to cut it down. As Emmett starts chopping, he asks Nell to help him with his writing. He explains that he has written a couple of stories, but can't seem to come up with a satisfying ending for them. Hearing this, Nell readily agrees and feels relieved to know he has never given up on his passion. Hours later, Nell and Emmett return to his house with their Christmas tree. As soon as they enter, Marnie runs up to them, excitedly showing off all the Christmas ornaments she made by hand. She then secretly informs Nell that in the recent Secret Santa game, she got Emmett's name and wants to give him something special. Upon hearing this, Nell offers to help her and then urges her to start with the tree decoration. Soon, all three of them decorate the tree beautifully and have a lot of fun in the process. That very night, all the residents of Springdale prepare for the annual gingerbread competition. They gather at the local bakery and begin collecting all the necessary ingredients. Nell and Brad, who are partners in the competition, decide on their execution plan and start building their gingerbread house with excitement. At one point, Brad briefly excuses himself and approaches Emmett. He then hands the latter a proposal to sell the bookstore. As said before, Emmett immediately declines, but Brad keeps on insisting. He even offers a huge sum of money that might be beneficial for Marnie's future. Not wanting to argue, Emmett agrees to review the proposal, but makes no promises about selling the store. Pleased, Brad thanks him and returns to building his gingerbread house. Having overheard part of the conversation, Nell asks Brad what's going on. That's when Brad explains that he wants to buy and renovate several properties in Springdale, with Emmett's bookstore being his top priority. He then adds that he's willing to go to great lengths to acquire it. Upon hearing all this, Nell feels really uneasy, but decides to keep quiet. Shortly after the competition ends, and Mrs. Ferguson, a local, carefully judges all the gingerbread houses. After some deliberation, she announces Marnie and Emmett as the winners. Marnie cheers with excitement, and everyone present congratulates her warmly. Moments later, while everyone is busy celebrating, a tense Emmett approaches Jenny, who also happens to be the bakery owner, and asks her about Brad's offer. Jenny replies that Brad has offered her a substantial amount of money as well, and is practically forcing her to sell the bakery. Hearing this, Emmett admits that he's unsure what to do about the bookstore. With Marnie being just a child, there's no guarantee she would be willing to take over the store in the future. The two discuss their plans for quite some time before heading back to their respective families. Eventually, the celebration ends, and everyone heads back home. During this time, Emmett offers to drop Nell off at her hotel. She readily agrees and thanks him for his kindness. Emmett simply smiles and urges Nell to keep in touch even after she leaves town. Nell, who is planning to leave the next day after completing all her interviews, assures him that she will always stay in contact. Soon after, the two reach the hotel, bid each other goodnight, and go their separate ways. The next morning, while Nell is busy writing the sequel to her book, she receives a call from Caroline, who informs her that her entire family is quarantined due to the flu. Nell, who's an orphan and had planned to celebrate Christmas with Caroline and her family, is shocked to hear the news and wishes them a speedy recovery. With nowhere else to go, she decides to stay in Springdale until Christmas. After a brief conversation, Nell bids Caroline goodbye and hangs up. She then opens the parcel sent to her by Emmett and finds a collection of his literary works. Excited, Nell begins reading them. A while later, Nell walks to the living area and sees Brad discussing with his colleagues about re-establishing Springdale as a holiday destination. As soon as the latter spots her, he invites her to sit down beside him and offer a few ideas of her own. However, when Nell learns that Brad is planning to turn the entire town upside down, she politely expresses her disinterest in the matter and walks away. Distraught, Brad stops her and asks if she's upset with him. Nell simply smiles and tells him that she has finally understood the man he is. Moments later, Nell arrives at Emmett's bookstore and greets him and Marnie excitedly. She then tells Marnie about the perfect gift for Emmett, and the two giggle with excitement. Nell also informs Emmett that she will be staying in Springdale until Christmas. Marnie cheers at the news and asks Nell to go skating with her. The latter readily agrees, and soon, the two head over to the ice rink. There, Marnie helps Nell glide around, and the two have a lot of fun together. Later that day, Nell and Marnie finish skating and return to Emmett's house. As they walk in, the doorbell rings. Emmett quickly answers the door and greets Marnie's babysitter, Stacy. Now relieved, he thanks her for watching Marnie, and then he and Nell rush out to the bookstore. At the bookstore, Nell and Emmett work together to decorate and organize the space for the upcoming book club meeting. Whilst talking, the two get really close and almost kiss. However, their moment is abruptly interrupted when a bunch of excited and giggling people enter the store for the book club event. Emmett and Nell immediately distance themselves from each other and greet their guests politely. They all then sit down together and begin discussing books that they like. Eventually, the topic changes to Brad's plan to change the town drastically. A very concerned Jenny exclaims that she doesn't want Springdale to turn into some cookie-cutter town with no heart. Emmett agrees with this. However, Haley and her husband Steve think that Brad's generous offer shouldn't be ignored. Soon the conversation gets heated, so Haley immediately calms everyone down and starts talking about Nell's book. She, along with a lot of older people there, asks Nell all about the book's details, character development, and potential ideas for the sequel. Nell answers the questions sincerely and feels happy to see so many people interested in her writing. Later that night, Emmett and Nell conclude the book club meeting and prepare to head back to Nell's hotel. They quickly get into a carriage and enjoy the view around them. At one point, Nell informs Emmett that she has read all of his stories and asserts that they are all brilliant. Recognizing his potential, she urges him to pursue his dreams and publish his work. Emmett, however, refuses, stating that he needs to focus on Marnie. In response, Nell sighs and asks him not to give up. She offers him numerous suggestions for continuing his writing. After considering her advice, Emmett hesitantly agrees. Moments later, Nell reaches her hotel. As soon as she enters her room, she quickly lays out all the little notes she made throughout the day. Using them, she continues writing her new book. Early the next morning, Nell visits Mrs. Ferguson, and the two have a nice chat while sipping tea. Just as they are talking, Jenny barges in and excitedly announces that Haley, who had been pregnant all along, has suddenly gone into labor. Hearing this, Nell and Mrs. Ferguson abruptly end their conversation and rush to Haley's house. There, they find the town mayor, Emmett, and many other townspeople waiting anxiously. Upon seeing them, Nell worriedly asks if they have any news about Haley. In response, Emmett exclaims that Steve and Haley have been blessed with a beautiful baby girl. The entire town cheers at the news and immediately begins preparing for the baby's arrival. Since Haley went into labor quite early, Nell and Mrs. Ferguson head to the hospital, while Emmett and the others stay behind to finish preparing the nursery. Sometime later, Steve arrives and helps with the nursery as well. While doing so, he announces that he will accept Brad's offer and sell his store. With a solemn expression, he explains that he has hardly been making any money, and with the added responsibilities of a baby, he has no choice but to accept the proposal. Similarly, Jenny says that she also needs money urgently, so selling the bakery is her only option. Upon hearing this, the mayor clarifies that Brad will only purchase the other properties if Emmett agrees to sell his bookstore. If not, he might rescind all the other offers. Hearing this, Jenny and Steve try to convince Emmett to sell the bookstore. Although he initially resists, he eventually agrees after a lot of persuasion. It's clear that the bookstore is very dear to him, and losing it would be a significant loss. Later that day, all of the townspeople gather for their Christmas Eve celebration. They decorate the town hall with beautiful ornaments and host a wonderful event. While Mrs. Ferguson sets out the snacks for the celebration, Brad and his team carefully inspect the decorations and overall setup. Brad loves the celebration, but his colleagues think it all seems a bit generic. They find nothing particularly intriguing or fun about the event. When Jenny notices this, she offers to show them pictures of different festivals and celebrations from the previous year. Despite her efforts, Brad's colleagues remain unimpressed and plan to abandon the renovation idea. Back at the hotel, Nell gets ready for the Christmas Eve celebration. Just as she is about to leave, she notices Brad's iPad lying around. Intrigued, she picks it up and sees the blueprint for his plan. It turns out that Brad wanted to completely change the town and uproot its essence. Furious, Nell rushes out of the hotel and heads towards the town hall to inform Emmett about Brad's plan. However, upon arriving, she runs into Marnie, who cheerfully greets her. Nell happily hugs Marnie and gives her a small present to give to Emmett as his secret Santa gift. After a brief chat, Nell hurries to find Emmett, but it's already too late. Emmett had already agreed to sell the store and was just about to sign the papers. Thankfully, Nell stops him just in time and urges him to think about Marnie. Shocked, she asks if he only cares about the money. This infuriates Emmett, leading to a heated argument. Heartbroken, Nell walks away and prepares to return to New York. However, right before she leaves, she hands Emmett Brad's iPad and shows him what Brad has really planned. Furious, Emmett, along with the mayor and Jenny, confronts Brad about his plan. They accuse him of misleading them and lying about leaving the stores intact. Brad tries to explain himself, but Emmett refuses to listen. Instead, he and Jenny tear up the contract right before Brad's eyes and demand that he leave their town immediately. As a result, a fuming and embarrassed Brad walks out of the town hall. In the meantime, a very distraught Nell continues packing her things in haste. With a deep sigh, she walks out of the hotel and prepares to load her belongings into a rental car. Just as she is about to drive away, the car breaks down. Annoyed, she tries to figure out what's wrong. At that moment, Emmett approaches her, out of breath, and explains that he went to her hotel to talk to her, but learned she had already checked out. As a result, he had been running around the town trying to find her. Upon hearing this, Nell simply rolls her eyes and asks him what he wants. In response, a very apologetic Emmett thanks her for showing him the truth and praises her for helping him realize his mistake. He then begs for her forgiveness and apologizes for abandoning her so suddenly. Thankfully, Nell forgives him and kisses him passionately. The two then decide to continue their long-forgotten date. The next morning, Nell, who has decided to stay in Springdale, goes to Emmett's house and wishes everyone a Merry Christmas. She then excitedly hugs both Emmett and Marnie. At that moment, Emmett hands her a present. When Nell opens it, she finds a picture of herself and Emmett together. Nell absolutely loves the gift and thanks Emmett happily. The movie finally ends with the two kissing and starting a new chapter of their lives together.